So this was a group that was first formed in the 1940s and was largely made up of World War II veterans. So it was just kind of like a common thing for this kind of group, these more rugged guys, to be involved with motorcycles and having that kind of that interest, and that's where it all started. The specific gangs that were formed out of this were gangs like the Hells Angels, which is pretty known, I feel like. The Pagans, the Vagos, Sons of Silence, Outlaws, Banditos, which is another very big one that a lot of people would know about, and the Mongols. So these outlaw motorcycle gangs, they actually make up a very, very small percentage of the overall motorcycle population. So when you see just a group of guys out riding, it doesn't necessarily mean by any means at all that they are at all affiliated with any kind of gang activity. So they actually make up 1% of all the motorcyclists, and you'll see that that's kind of like a common theme with Hells Angels or some of these other groups, where they'll actually wear a patch that says 1%, just for you to be able to see that. So although these groups do not partake in any do partake in organized crime, there are many other gangs or groups that don't participate in illegal activity. So kind of going back to what I was touching on earlier with how there's other gangs or groups that may not consider themselves gangs, where they're just out to ride and have fun or whatever, do what they like to do on their bike. So the next topic I'm going to touch on is how they've changed over time, how they've evolved, and the ways that they are hiding their crimes. So the outlaw motorcycle gangs were first viewed as like barroom brawlers who were not to be messed with. These gangs then became more involved in more nefarious activities. So they were your stereotypical tough guys, guys you didn't want to mess with, but it was more so like, I don't know, they would go and have a few drinks, and it was just like the guy in the room that you weren't going to mess with, where now they've turned to drug trafficking as well as a lot of other stuff that I'm going to touch on later on with this presentation. These groups, so a way that they would go about hiding things or camouflaging their activities, especially from the start, is, there's tons of bikes out on the road today, and a lot of people like to ride together. So they use this as a way to blend in with other motorcyclists, for them not to be able to be pointed out just by anybody who's driving by. So the large recreational population of motorcyclists help to hide these groups from the public and police eye, as I just said there. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the criminal activity, kind of the things that they were involved with, and you'll see how that change started to happen with moving from just the brawls to more things dealing with turf wars, and how the gangs really became affiliated. These motorcycle gangs partake in activities like drug trafficking and more specifically methamphetamines. These gangs transported large amounts of methamphetamines and money, where they're then able to sell and distribute to the population. These motorcycle gangs make their money from purchasing these drugs for cheaper rates in places like Mexico, and then are able to cut the product, which then allows them to sell larger quantities and still be able to make high dollar. So what I mean by that in that sense with cut it is they're going to add some kind of filler or something for them to then take however much they have and expand it, and they're still probably going to sell it as that high grade methamphetamine that they purchased. Also, they've had growth over time. Groups like these were first formed in the United States, but now have moved to other countries, which has allowed for drug smuggling and trafficking at a much higher scale. So with them getting these drugs from places like Mexico, where they're able to get it cheaper, now that they have that in with these groups where there's Hells Angels and the Banditos and stuff like that, where they have places in Mexico, now it's easier for them to obtain that as well as distribute back into the States, or even just distribute within where they're at in Mexico and those other southern regions. Okay, criminal activity continued. These different groups that make up the outlaw motorcycle games specify in different organized crimes. The different criminal activities they partake in include robbery, assault, homicide, weapons possession, assault, and most notably drug trafficking. So although these are not necessarily white collar crimes in their like normal sense, the way that you see it, this is all being camouflaged underneath this gang, and everything is done within the group and meant to be held within the group. Examples of these gang activities have different forms of organized crime schemes are the Hells Angels of New York being involved in the operations of a nightclub, and the Hells Angels of Cleveland are known to be employed as enforcers. So each of these groups, like, they have different ways of making money, and they also have different jobs within their certain group or chapter. These groups have also been known to be contract killers who receive payment by the planned murder of another individual. So yeah, as a large, a lot of their money comes from, number one is the methamphetamine distribution, and then this is another big thing that they are known for. If you were to ask anybody, like, oh, what do you know about the Hells Angels, or what do you know about the Banditos or the Vagos or anything, this is a lot of the stuff that they're known for. So breaking it down in a class system, so it's like almost if you were to look in any class, any force of the military, you'd see they have a class system, a ranking system, and it's a hierarchical class system that promotes and demotes members. So you're going to start off with the national officers, who are at the highest, and that's made up of the president and the vice president. Then you have the chapter president. Following that is the secretary or the treasurer, and then down to the vice president. Then you have the road captain and the sergeant at arms. And then below that is the soldiers. And at the bottom tier, you'll see the probationary members or the honorary members. And we'll continue to break that down as we go. So another thing that might not be as known about these groups is that they also are in the sex trafficking ring. So in this specific case, these gangs were known to target juveniles for prostitution for ways of profit. And as I said, this was not necessarily known like what they're known for. This is another way that they profit from for their gang. Okay, so another thing is their biker constitution, and this is kind of like the set of rules that they must follow to be able to even join the gang or to stay within this gang or this crew that they're in. So each gang has a certain set of rules, as I said, and this is just very similar. This is not like one specific gang, and this is just a general sense of, oh, a lot of these follow this. So you must be 18 or older. You must be sponsored by a member, meaning that you cannot just join off the streets. You have to know somebody to be able to get in. You must complete a probationary period. So there's a point in time where you're not going to be able to be seen as like a legitimate member, and this is like a 6-month probationary period that each individual who gets in this gang must follow. Any members caught using the needle will lose their color and everything that comes with it. So because they are so heavily involved in the sale of methamphetamines, they are not to use the product. So if they are caught at any moment using drugs or anything like that, they will be stripped of their membership, and that can also mean quite a bit more, as in they can be, maimed, or they can be killed even. So, and lastly, which I believe is very interesting, is that they must have a Harley Davidson or Indian motorcycle, and that's the only one they're allowed to use. So both of those motorcycles are manufactured in the United States, and that's a very big component of being within these groups, is that you have to use a American-made motorcycle. So yeah, and yeah, like with the hierarchy of it, you see that like the lowest members are not going to be able to talk or speak with or have any input with the highest ranking members, just as you would see in any other kind of group where they have this system. And one of the things that comes with this is that these gangs have conflict between each other, whether it's due to drug trafficking routes or with just turf wars over who's in charge of what area. So just an example of this is in May of 2015, a gang in Texas met up with another to discuss issues that were going on. and it ended up with 7 men dead and many others injured. So you can see that it just as you look at any other organized crime, if you look back to even with the Mafia of New York or whatever, it's same thing where if you don't follow your P's and Q's and you have to know where you're at all times, if you don't abide by that, then there are consequences that will happen. All right, and lastly, just to see what is going on today in these outlaw motorcycle gangs, they continue to thrive and they've kept control of methamphetamine trade within the United States. And it's said that as of today, these motorcycle gangs control as much as 40% of all methamphetamine trade within the United States. So that is just enormous. These gangs also continue to have these strong rivalries and issues among them. Just another example, on June 22nd, 2020, 6 men were charged with strong arm robbery and assault. These men were a part of the Rock Hill chapter in Hell's Angels. So the conflict between them just continues to grow. And within the past 40 years, these gangs have evolved a lot and went from your stereotypical meathead tough guys to a sophisticated organized crime ring. Thank you.